officially the end of the year, and that marks the end of my challenge where every book I read and every move I make is adventurous, and thank goodness. I pushed myself to be adventurous in every aspect of my life this year, from learning Spanish to traveling to Zion's National Park, Mexico, New York City. I explored my community more, and I read a large variety of adventure books. I literally pushed this challenge to the extreme, and I have literally nowhere left to go with it. I have read historical fiction adventures, non-fiction adventures, contemporary adventures, fantasy adventures. I have read every sort of adventure book imaginable, and it was fun, and I enjoyed it. Excuse you. I have read every type of adventure book imaginable, and it was fun, and I enjoyed it, but I am ready to just be able to pick up a book and read it because I want to read that book, regardless of its genre. So let's do a quick book update on the books that I've read since October. The first one is Midnight in Chernobyl. I know I started to talk about this in the last video, but I finished it, and boy is it amazing. Again, it is such a travesty how little I knew about Chernobyl and the events that actually took place. I now know everything I could ever want or need to know about the event, and it was told to me in such a compelling narrative that made even the most complicated scientific aspects approachable. I did think that the timeline was a little bit tricky, jumping here and there, but with so many different accounts and experiences to combine, it's inevitable that you're gonna have to jump back and forth some. All in all, I would definitely recommend this to other people. The next one I read is Wildborn by Brandon Mull, and this is part of the Spirit Animal series where each book is written by a different mid-grade author. And while I have loved every book I've picked up by Brandon Mull, this one was unfortunately the exception. I just couldn't get into the characters and their stories, and I think one of the reasons is that whenever you're hearing about an event, it's being told in past tense by one of the characters. It takes out any high-stakes momentum from dangerous situations because you know that the character comes out okay, you know exactly what the ending is because you're being told the story from the ending. And that kind of storytelling technique is fine on occasion, but when it's used for the entirety of the book, it just makes the plot uninteresting and the pacing very slow. My next book is The Forever War by Joe Haldeman, and I'm not usually into military fiction, but this book definitely leaned more towards sci-fi than battle logistics. The book's opening view on sexuality is not my preference, but seeing where the rest of the novel goes, I think this was done intentionally to provide stark contrast to future life. Overall, I loved the concept, the flow, and the evolution of technology. The next book is Again But Better by Christie and Riccio. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. And the first time I read this book, I gave it my typical 10% try, and after that, I just wasn't feeling it. But I did decide to pick it up and give it another go, and I will say that once they go back for the redo, the pacing, the writing, the content, it all gets much better. And it kind of makes me understand why I hated the character the first go around. I think that maybe I was supposed to, so that I could better appreciate her change in the second half. I still don't love it, but I understand why it was done. Unfortunately, it did take half of the book to get to that point, and that half of the book was chock full of pop culture references. I think that's ultimately what's going to date the book and make it irrelevant. All of the references to specific movies, trending books, games, companies, all of that is very short-lived in our modern world. And so basing a lot of the dialogue and the relationship development on those pop culture aspects is going to make the novel very short-lived for the coming generation. I mean, we're already getting to a point in YA audience where the readers weren't even alive when Angry Birds was developed. So overall, it's a cute idea for a book, but it's probably too niche and could have used another round of edits. Ringworld by Larry Niven is the next book on my list, and I chose it because of those pamphlets you can get at the library where it lists like science fiction books that you should read. You know what I'm talking about. Ringworld was on this list. So I checked out the audiobook, gave it a listen, and I was so pleasantly surprised. The book has a unique plot structure, not at all the 3-act system, with the climax happening on the literal last page, or what I assume was the last page because I was listening to the audiobook. And what I absolutely love about this book is that something at the beginning was just a complete joke and no one took it seriously. and then it becomes the whole pivoting point for the book. Just remarkably well written. I Am Number 4 by Pittacus Lore is a solid plot with good characters and pacing. I do think that the dialogue is a little bit basic, but as a YA book, it's passable. I feel like a lot of books in the young adult genre are fun to pick up and read as an adult, but this book, the dialogue and the back and forth banter between some of the characters just feels a little juvenile as you go through it. I will say that by the end of the book, I was extremely invested in the main character's personal anguish and questions, and I was very disappointed that the book ended before I got those answers, especially since he had the letter in his hand that would give me those answers, and he just didn't read it. And I feel like I'm never going to get that satisfying conclusion because subsequent books are told from different perspectives. So the ending was kind of a loss for me. I feel like I want a payoff that I'm never going to get. Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I know that I am late to this ship, but it is so good. Heists aren't usually my thing, but the characters are fire. I loved every single one of them. And Kaz's backstory is absolutely heartbreaking when you pair it with what he learns he actually wants from life. I think that this book was especially captivating after having watched the Shadows and Bones TV series, because I had a bit of the backstory from the crew members, but I do actually recommend going back and reading the Shadows and Bone trilogy before you read Six of Crows. I just didn't know that that was a thing, so shame on me for not doing my research. Now, my last book is The Illustrated Man by Ray Bradbury, and I actually haven't finished this book yet because I got the audiobook and it got returned before I had a chance to finish it, but it is by far the best book I have read all year, and it is quickly climbing to one of my favorite books of all time. It is a classic Ray Bradbury book in that it has dystopian and sci-fi and futuristic concepts just smattered through the entire book. It's all based around this carnival worker who is tattooed by a witch who enchants each of the tattoos to tell a story or tell the future of the person looking at it. It's a really unique concept. And so the whole book is a series of short stories, each one about a different tattoo on his body. It's just a completely genius idea, and I'm in love with it. Alrighty, so for my year in complete conclusion, I read 45 books and 16,264 pages. My average book length was 361 pages, and my average rating was 4 stars. As for the best books that I read this year, here are the books that I rated 5 stars in no particular order. Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo, The Forever War by Joe Haldeman, Ella Enchanted by Gail Carson Levine, The Tutor's Daughter by Julie Klassen, the Wax and Wane series by Brandon Sanderson, of course all 3, The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan, The Caves of Steel by Isaac Asimov, 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, Sunshine by Robin McKinney, The Riftwar Sagas No. 1 and 2 by Raymond Feist, Stardust by Neil Gaiman, Hatchet and the River by Gary Paulsen, and The 199-Pound Adventure by Agatha Christie. So that's it. That is my entire year wrapped up in review, packaged up, and ready to go. I am so excited for the challenge that I have planned for next year. It is a little bit more open and freeing, which is very nice after a year of constraint. Make sure to keep your eyes open for the next few weeks to see that video, and Happy New Year!